Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to another video. I'm back down here at Suspension Secrets with my good friend Matt with my brand new M3 competition xDrive. For those of you long-term watchers or people that have been watching the channel for about the past year, I actually popped my blue M3 down here straight away. I think it was like a week old or something.
Not long after, yeah.
To get it set up, or so you could have a look at it, see what it was like underneath, and yeah, Matt played around with a few little things that made a big difference, as these little things do with suspension. I've come down here again today, and well, it's changed. You've expanded. There's lifts here. You've got more staff running around, and it's great to see. But we'll talk more about what's going on aside from your handiwork at the end of the video. Cool. I think we'll start by introducing Matt. So this is Matt. Hi. Yeah, thanks a lot for having us down again, Matt.
Yeah, no worries.
It's really interesting. If you head over to Suspension Secrets website, which will be down in the description, there's some really interesting articles on there. Do you want to give us a quick rundown of what you offer here, or what what's a typical customer come down here with? I see on your Instagram, again, definitely worth checking out because you get lots of car porn down here. And what's a typical customer come down here, and what do they have done to their car? Yeah,
so our sort of base services are like a full geometry alignment, usually for like fast road or track use, or corner weight alignment. If you've got height adjustable coilovers, that sort of thing, we can tune the balance at each tyre. And then we also do sort of aftermarket upgrades and tuning. We make our own bits as well that we can fit. So make a lot of supercar shims. So sort of the likes of Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes-AMG GTR. Hurricane as well. We can shim them to get more caster, more camber, especially on the front axle. That's where it makes a big difference. And it's just getting rid of that understeer that kills the majority of supercars. So that's quite a common service. We also work a lot in the BMW and the Porsche worlds, on the GT cars and the M cars. Just again, upgrading, installing our own products, other people's products, coilovers, and also adjusting as standard what's there to adjust, and just getting the best, similar to what we're doing today, just getting the best out of what we can adjust to standard. Yeah,
and I think that's what's so interesting to me is obviously, you know, out the box car, even an M car, there's a limited amount of stuff you can do with it, but out of the box, a lot of the time they come with a safe setup or very road setup, and not even like a square road setup, as we found out with this car. There's the parameters aren't like massively tight, and you still find like discrepancies between toe and all the rest of it in that car. So it's just nice knowing that the car is going to be set up perfectly square, and nice and even though it's a completely base setup. Just touching upon the supercar subject that we just talked about, I remember talking to you about this last time, and if you did watch that last video, I might be repeating myself a little bit, but I had that R8 V10 around Silverstone last year.
Gen 2.
Yes, Gen 2, latest one, the performance. And it was great, but the first thing I noticed after lap 2, when I started to push it, was, surprise, surprise, understeer. And I remember you explaining to me last time I was here, was these test drivers for Ferrari or whoever it is, they get sent out and they come back and they're trying to find a car that's safe. They're trying to find a setup that's safe. So that your average, let's say, Ferrari customer that goes and boots it down their local road, they're not going to end up backwards into a tree. It's going to probably inherently understeer, whatever. So there's all this performance in these cars, high performance supercars, that need unlocking. And if you are taking your car on track, or you do like pushing it hard on road and you do Euro road trips, there's a 720S off camera just there, it's worth getting it set up properly, because those small changes suddenly unlock, or tiny little shims that you show me in there that honestly look like they would do nothing. They suddenly give you that front end that you've been missing, and literally unlock the car completely. So it's definitely worth, although you might think you're getting something amazing, yes, in a straight line it's incredible, but there's so much you can do with small little adjustments.
Huge amount. I think the biggest example of that, setting a car up for safety after it's been, because when they're setting these times on the Ring or Monza, you know, they've got the best version of that car possible to get that time, and then they back it off for sale. And I think the best example of that is if you look under a 991 GT3 or GT3 RS, GT2 RS, any of that range, the amount of adjustment is phenomenal from Porsche out the factory. They give you camber front and rear, toe front and rear, anti-roll bars front and rear, which for a road car is insane.
It's amazing.
And ride height front and rear, all adjustable. So you can tune all of that as standard. And that just shows like they leave everything there to get it back to the machine it can be. But for sale, they back it all off.
Right, okay. Yeah, so it's there. It's there to be unlocked.
It's literally under the skin. It's so frustrating because they give you everything. It's all sat waiting just to be adjusted.
Yeah, and 95% of customers probably never adjust that.
Because they do, like, let's not forget, they do still drive very well. You know, they don't produce a car that's safe and drives badly. It still drives really nice out the box, but when you start to push that extra tenth, that's when you start to feel the understeer and you start pressing on and you feel it's misgivings, and that's where they give you the adjustment to get that back.
Wow, okay. And I think a really good example of that, although his car isn't exactly stock, but Leighton, who is one of your sort of, let's say, development-sponsored drivers or that you've worked with, well, in the time that I've known you anyway, at least the past year and a half.
Yeah, a couple of years now,
And Leighton runs RMA track days. You're probably familiar with him. I'll put his Instagram up here. But he's got a GT3 RS Visac pack. Slash suspension secrets pack. And that car, I mean, he's an absolute nutcase and so talented, so fast.
Very quick.
But that car is just, you know, that car's ever evolving, isn't it? And in fact, you're showing me some new bits that you're sort of developing for him at the moment.
next step for him. And that was an interesting sort of story, really, because we started off with the stock car and we gave him a setup. He's like, I want a bit more, so we rinsed the stock adjustment like we were talking about then. We really rinsed it to get as much as we could for him. And then we started looking for the next step, which on the market there's a few options, but very high cost options. So we started looking what we could develop and sort of fill that void with, really. More for circuit behaviour as opposed to road. So we developed the handling pack that is on his car. So that's different top mount spring. We changed the damper ratio with a new spring cup, bump steer tower ends, and we play with the spring rates. And it just altered the behaviour instantly. So increased caster, increased camber, and it just makes the car so much more stable through the corners, loads more cornering speed, because we're just working the tyre how it should. And the spring rate change, the biggest thing that does is on the brakes, it stops the back going light. It just keeps it pinned, so you can run that rake angle to get the nose, but then under brakes you don't get the usual negative of rake angle, which is a light rear end on brakes, because it keeps it pressed down.
Almost a lift-off oversteer sort of a sensation.
Exactly, And then he's coupled the kit with surface transform discs, so again, increased braking performance, and the Michelin Cup 2R tyre, so again, massively increased traction. So the trio of those parts has just made him rapid.
I mean, it's just... It's crazy. It's fast. I think he's quicker than a cup car around some circuits.
Yeah, we got the unofficial sort of road legal lap record round Donny in his car last year. When he was flying.
I've seen that lap. It's just it's mad. It's mad. In terms of this car, so what I found quite interesting actually, I had it at Miltech about a week ago. Had a good look underneath, and from my amateur eyes, I looked underneath and I was like, okay, the only difference I can see, there's a transfer box off the back of the gearbox. There's a small prop shaft coming off that going forward to the front axle. So I was like, oh, that's it. That's the only difference. But obviously, I hadn't thought about it properly. And obviously, you've got the front drive shafts as well. But along with those drive shafts, that then causes a bit of a headache in terms of your normal setup.
Just packaging issues.
Packaging issues,
exactly.
So what have we found, or what have we found? What have you found? What was the thing? What did you find in the front end that was different to, let's say, the rear-wheel drive?
Yes, so obviously you've got the drive shaft coming through the centre of everything into the wheel. So where that space would normally be, there used to be your anti-roll bar and drop link would come straight through where that shaft is now. So they've re-engineered the roll bar to a completely new shape, and it comes in front of the hub instead. And similar looking drop link, but slightly different length. So new roll bars on there. They've also sort of, it looks like a retrofit, but it won't be. But they've welded a section into the subframe now to sort of let the drive shaft come through and a bit of brace in there as well. And they've also re-engineered, I'm guessing, the subframe end, because everything else looks the same, and they've knocked the camber off slightly and altered the hub. So where the shock would usually come through the hub and sort of poke out the back of the hub by sort of 80 mil or so, the shaft is there now, so they've had to manufacture a shorter shock body and then a slightly deeper hub to sort of clamp it safely but not have the extruded shock out the bottom. So it's just new shock, new hub, altered subframe and new roll bar.
And then that's equated to, well, that you found out, so it's out of the box, my blue one, the front end was actually pretty sorted with it.
Yeah, about
it?
1.8 degrees of camber, which is a really nice fast road setting.
Yeah.
You start to lack on track and you start killing tyre, but on the road, really nice number.
Yeah.
Whereas for this, they've backed that off about half a degree, so about 1.3.
Yep.
Which that's going to be for traction reasons on throttle, I'm guessing, because they've now got driven wheels up front.
Yep.
They've got to consider putting the power down and not losing traction front to rear, and then the traction control starts having a bit of a mare.
Bit of a nightmare. Yeah. So I suppose it matches it up nicely with the rear axle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, it was actually square, wasn't it? The front
Yeah.
and rear were both exactly 1.3.
1.3. Yeah.
So yeah, both even levels of tyre on the ground, apart from the 10mm difference in contact patch.
Sure. Okay. And in terms of, so we've been talking about camber. In terms of towing, cars come natural with usually some positive.
Yeah, usually always tone in for a road car out
Yep.
of the factory, unless there's something gone wrong. And on this, the rear was towing in, but it was an average of 1.5mm in axle,
Yep.
but it wasn't actually even per wheel. So you had 0.5mm on one wheel and
Yep.
2.5mm on the other. So that on throttle, that's going to cause a slight anti-clockwise rotation.
Yeah, as one wheel sort of pushes,
yeah, exactly.
pushes into.
One's got more directional control than the other.
Yeah.
And then the front axle is the same old story of a huge chunk of toe in, basically.
Yep.
For that really high speed stability, braking traction in the snow,
Yep.
having as much traction as possible up front,
Yep.
for stability reasons more than anything.
Yeah.
But that just starts to lack that turning response.
Yes.
And when we dial that out, because we've not got enough camber,
Yep.
over the last generation, you're going to be lacking that mid-corner front end feel.
Yep.
So we can get a bit of that back by tweaking the toe setting, basically.
Okay. So you've tweaked the toe on the front axle
Yeah.
and on the rear.
Yeah, so the rear we've given similar numbers but even, so you're committing straight. We've actually increased it slightly to get the power down more.
Yep.
That's only because we've increased the rear camber for that mid-corner traction, which gives a little bit less straight line traction.
Yep.
So we gain that back with the toe setting.
Which isn't a problem, especially in this xDrive.
No, definitely not. Yeah, I wouldn't
I'm
say
not
so.
lacking for forward grip. We actually weighed it as well. I'm not going to give away how much it is, how much it weighs, but we did all have a guess, so I'm just going to cut to that in a second. But before I do that, have a quick guess and comment below. Don't cheat. The rear-wheel drive version was 17, what did I say?
1735.
1735, and that was with a bit of camera gear in the boot, I think about half a tank of fuel.
Yep.
This thing's got about 3/4 of a tank, and it's got quite a bit of camera gear in the boot. So have a guess, comment below, and then check this clip out. So what are we guessing weight-wise?
I'm going for 1840.
1840?
1870.
1870. Oh, you can't guess because you've seen. I will say, well, I'm hoping 1820.
Oh, caveat, it does have a trunk full of luggage.
Oh, it does, and it's got almost a full tank of fuel.
Yeah.
1780.
Whoa, that's all right. Nice.
1750, I reckon.
Yeah. It's a lightweight. I'm surprised it hasn't floated away. Right, hopefully some of you got close to that. I think I actually won the weight game there, but I played it safe. So it's heavy. We all know they're heavy, but actually it's not as heavy as I thought. If you took the fuel out of that and you took the luggage out of it, you're probably looking at something that's close to 1,700 kilos or whatever. And I know that's not how you weigh cars these days, but yeah, it's not as horrendous or heavy as I thought, and it's about 50 kilos more than a rear-wheel drive, which is exactly what BMW claims. So you've actually produced your own components down here, suspension components, which I find massively interesting. I know when I came here about a year ago, you were doing stuff, but you certainly didn't have the machinery you've got now.
No, yeah. So for about a year and a half, we've been doing our own product line. It started really small, we started with BMW M2, which is the same as M3, M4 really. So with the rear toe arms, and then we moved to the rear camber arms, then traction arms, then camber plates, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
We just wanted to sort of cover the car. And then we've branched into Porsche since then, and the supercar stuff as well. And we're always expanding, so we're pushed into E92 M3, we're pushed into E46 M3.
Yep.
So we're forever expanding the range. It's always been made in the UK, manufactured in the UK. But it's always been designed and prototyped in-house.
Yeah.
And then we've had it made. But yeah, recently we decided to bring the machines here and just make everything in-house as well. So we've got full control over it. Our prototyping time frame is reduced massively because we can turn one off in a day. And we know if it fits straight away, and we can make tweaks and alterations to the geometry as we please, and then we can run the batch off.
And in fact, we've actually got a kit that I'm going to pull out in a second that's going on to my M2. Obviously, well, hopefully you know that I'm doing this M2 Club Sport build. that's meant to be more like road and track, but slowly it's becoming more and more track. Yeah, I'm finding out very slowly or very quickly, in fact, that a very good track car tends not to be the best road car in the world, but you can kind of, a bit aggressive. You can shuffle both. So, so it's been a big learning process for me. We'll have a quick look at that setup, and then tomorrow, this is actually getting its run-in service. So I'm going to get that done first before I go out and kick its head in a little bit to see what Matt's setup has done. Obviously, I'm going to experience some of it driving home, but I want to get everything sort of, serviced and changed before I go out and give it a proper first drive, if you like. And we can talk about what the car's like when that happens. So let's go and get that kit.
Cool.
What have we got going on here? We've got lots of lovely looking components.
So these are all for your M2 comp. So we've got rear camber arm set here. So that's going to adjust your rear camber past the OE adjustment bolt. We'll also supply them with a lockout kit to lock out the original eccentric bolt that stops anything slipping when it's set. So all the adjustments done up here with these arms. But then got rear toe arms. So we'll get the rear toe arms on the M2 is a real sort of Achilles heel because they have big rubber bushes in them. Through loading up through the corners, especially on track, that actually flexes and changes the toe dynamically in a bad way through the corner. So when you fit these, they're rose jointed, so it keeps it solid through the corner. So whatever you set statically remains. So that's a real positive aspect. And the other side of it is when you increase camber past a certain point, you can't get the toe in anymore on the standard adjustment bolt. It just won't go far enough. So these arms are required to get that toe in when you've got the camber where you want it for track use. Then here we've got front control arm bushes. So these go in the sort of the front caster arm, if you like, the arm that goes forward, lower down at the front. And it's got a really big void rubber bush in it, and that has a lot of movement as standard. So under braking, it lets the arm flex and it pushes and generates bump steer, so it actually flexes the toe in and out as you're on the brakes. And similarly through the corners as you're loading off and loading on, it lets that movement happen. So these stop that and keep, again, the toe set and you set the same. And under braking, it just stops that slight wheel shake under really heavy braking on track, and just keeps it really sturdy and just makes it feel so much more connected as a driver fitting those. And then these, don't have the bearing in yet, but these are your rear subframe solid bush. So this is the only bush on the subframe suspension-wise, if we're not looking at the diff, that is rubber. So it's solid mounted to the actual chassis in the 4 points. And then this bush goes to your lower control arm in the subframe, and it's rubber and it moves around. So again, under load, this would flex and it would change your camber angle through the corner. So we swapped the rubber one out for this, and it again keeps it where you set it. So it's more about consistency on the settings you set, and not letting the external loads flex things and move things and change things as you're driving it.
Which you feel a lot more. So obviously these are road cars. An M2 is a road car. And on road at normal speeds, the stock stuff kind of does what it's meant to do. It gives you the comfort. It doesn't move around too much. There's not too much flex. But if you get an M2 like mine and you start pushing it hard on track, you put cup 2s on it, so suddenly you've got 10% more load on everything. You're taking it to the limit. You do start noticing those discrepancies, if you like, or the issues. They start popping out, and the movement, as you say, that's what you notice. Even, and I'm sure this has got a similar setup to the M2, but it's a lot stiffer, and that is a lot more direct than the M2 when you jump on them back to back. And you notice the M2 move around under brakes, and you just, sometimes you think, is it the brakes? Something's wrong. It's not. It's just the movement
things moving
in all these. All the arms and everything's just struggling to deal with those loads. I'm very much looking forward to seeing what these beautiful bits of kit are like. Let's just have a look at those two bits down there, Matt, if you don't mind.
Of course,
and explain what they are.
So this is the bare bones of our M2 comp, or M3, F80, F82, M4 camber plate. So this replaces the OEM top mount effectively at the front. Because on the front of the F8 M3s and the Gs, there's no camber adjustment as standard, it's fixed. And on the F80s, it's a real problem because they come with about 0.8 degrees if it's not lowered especially, which is nowhere near enough. You kill the outside edge of your front tyres, really vague steering, no front end grip. So when you fit these, it allows that camber adjustment. And you can get up to about 4 degrees on here.
Wow.
And we tend to set sort of 2.5-ish for sort of fast road and sort of half track, half road use. Which is really, like, the difference is massive on that front end because it's a really positive front end. So that's our plate. And then a few little differences with these are we tooth our camber plates so they can't slip out on track. So when you're running curbs aggressively, if it's a pure slot, they can slip. So even if they're torqued up, it's just the generic force and vibration can just force them to shift. And at that point, your toe setting changes, and it can be quite dangerous at speed if it does happen.
Of course.
So we
like
tooth
at the
ours.
Nürburgring or something.
Exactly, yeah. So with ours being toothed, when they're set, and they can't slip.
Okay.
So it's much safer in that respect. And then we've also got a second set of holes in our camber plate. So they can be rotated 33 degrees, and that allows you to then adjust caster as well as camber, to get a much more positive front end feel. That's more adjustable on sort of a coilover unit, because the OEM spring is quite big, so you're quite limited how close to the chassis you can take the spring in the caster position. So with an OEM spring, we tend to just fit them in camber position. It has a bit of caster, but if you're going for an aftermarket spring, you can rotate that and get the best of both.
Wow.
I think this is one of our newer sort of products. So this is developed for the 992 Porsche GT3. So the newest one, basically. And now they've gone to a double wishbone suspension. They no longer have a top mount that will do camber. The damper will do nothing for you. So this is a piece that's in the hub as OEM, but the max camber we've been able to achieve without really dropping the ride height is about 2.4 degrees on the front. Good for road, but if you're starting to use your 992 on track, you're going to start killing tyres. You want a little bit more from it. So these can go in and allow up to 3.6 degrees of camber. And they look exactly the same as OEM. You wouldn't really know they were in there, apart from the camber setting can be more aggressive.
A lot more aggressive. Wow, There's a lot to be unlocked from these sort of cars or those sort of cars down there. You know, out of the box, they're good, but there's so much more to be unlocked if you use the car properly and you drive it hard, obviously. So, I'll join you in a couple of days' time once I've had the first service on Grilles. And I look forward to seeing what the car's like. But in the meantime, thanks so much.
No worries.
It's been great to see you.
Good to have you back.
Drink lots of tea. I'm sure I'll see you very, very soon.
Definitely.
Cheers. You joined me about a week later, and my M3 has now had its run-in service. Big shout out to the boys and girls at Berry BMW in Heathrow. They did it whilst I waited, service while you wait. It took about 2 hours, and I drank plenty of their coffee and used their Wi-Fi, so it was a really efficient use of time for me. Before we get on to what this car feels like now that Matt and Suspension Secrets have tweaked it, just want to point out something else that's been changed or been done to the car in that week, and you might have spotted it already. Yes, I've got a Royal steering wheels. Jack has covered my original wheel in beautiful high quality Alcantara. I've got the M stitching on it and a Fiona red strip at the top, so really works well with this interior. You might remember the one that I had in my rear wheel drive M3 competition, the orange strip at the top, obviously to go with the Kyalami orange, and he's managed to do it again with this wheel. And I've only had it on, to be honest, a few hours, but I'm absolutely loving it so far. He's taken a small amount of padding out of here, so it's a little bit thinner. There's only so much you can do with these new G wheels, but I love it. I love the way it looks, I love the way it feels, and I'm sure it's going to be fantastic when I do get it out on track. And I've got my gloves on just to give you that extra purchase on the wheel. So massive shout out and thanks to Jack from Royal. Now that the car's been run in and it's almost done 1,500 miles, it means that I can rev it all the way out and utilise all of that power and torque. And because it's the xDrive, well, although it is almost ideal conditions out there, I can just lay all of that power and torque down any time I want. My favourite preset in these cars, my M1 button if you like, is 4-wheel drive sport, so it sends more power and torque to the rear axle, I think about 70%, and all of the traction switched off because you really don't need it in this car, although you've still got that really fancy 10-way traction control. But for me, you've got all the traction in the world, as I'll demonstrate coming out of here. So first gear, little bit of opposite lock needed there because, well, I was laying down, or trying to lay down 500 horsepower. It sends everything to the rear axle initially, and when it senses a bit of slip, then it sends to the front axle. So you don't need to opposite lock it just like you would in a rear wheel drive car. You don't need to put that much steering input in, but you still need to adjust a little bit when you've got everything switched off. But it's brilliant. It retains that playfulness of the rear wheel drive, but it gives you that added security, grip, traction, catapult feature out of any junction or any corner. You just put your foot down and it just goes. It's just fantastic, really, really is. And it never, ever gets old. One of the main things that Matt has done to this car, which again he did with the rear wheel drive car, is play around with the toe settings on the front and the rear axle. And what that does is dial out all of the nervousness that these cars have out of the box. They're brilliant out of the box, don't get me wrong, but on the road they're just very fidgety. They just feel like they want to go left or right or wherever you send them. So very accurate feeling, which is great maybe when you're on track, but when you're on the road they just constantly want to change direction and sometimes tram line, etc. So whatever he's done to this car has just made it feel far more relaxed again, just like my rear wheel drive car. It just feels happy all the time. If you let go of the wheel, it doesn't feel like it's going to send you off into the closest bush or field, and I think that's really important for a road car setup. He's also played around quite a bit with the rear settings just to allow it to sit on that tyre patch when you send it into a corner really quickly. I'm only really going to feel that when I'm on a really deserted road or when I take it out on track. So it's just going to stop it skipping through a corner. It will just allow it to fall down onto the full sort of tread of the tyre, and it will give me essentially maximum grip. It's going to be interesting to see what this is like out on track because I haven't tried it out on track, and as we just talked about, without that sort of better negative camber on the front axle, I feel it's not going to have quite the front end that the rear wheel drive car has. Hopefully I'm wrong, but I think it will lack a little bit. So maybe down the track I'm going to do a few things to play around with the front setup, maybe lower it a little bit, which in turn will then give me a little bit more negative, sort of natural negative camber. That might bring it back up to about 1.5, 1.6. Massive thanks to Matt at Suspension Secrets. You'll find all their details in the description below. Also huge thanks to Jack at Royal Steering Wheels for just completing the interior of this car and adding a small amount of steering feel as well. It's not just aesthetics, it's that little bit of feel that you get back with the thinner rim and the extra sort of purchase and grip that you get with the Alcantara. So huge thanks to Jack, and Very BMW for doing the run-in service. I'm going to look forward to doing loads more miles in this car now that it's been opened up, now that it sounds good, now that it feels good. Yeah, I'm really excited about this car. I think there's just a couple of extra little tweaks that I need to do that we've touched upon. Maybe lowering the front end just to make it look better, but also to improve that negative camber on the front axle. Until the next video, guys, take it easy, and I'll see you very soon. Cheers.